Hello, bonjour. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are gathering on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. I'm pleased to join my colleague, Minister of Public Safety Marco Mendicino, as well as our co-chairs, British Columbia Attorney General Niki Sharma, and Mike Farnworth, BC's Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General. Although, as you can see, we have a number of other colleagues here from Ontario, from Alberta, and from Manitoba. We have spent today discussing a topic of concern to many Canadians, our bail system. We met because Canadians expect their elected officials to work together and to collaborate effectively, particularly when it comes to ensuring their safety. The issue of bail is top of mind for many Canadians, including all of us, because of recent tragic events. While my counterparts and I and our officials have been working on the issue in earnest since our last meeting in October, the tragic murder of OPP Constable Greg Pershala in December was a catalyst for change. We are all now sadly familiar with the tragic circumstances that led to Constable Pershala's death. One of the two individuals charged with first-degree murder in this case was out on bail. He was awaiting trial for a previous assault and weapons charge. There had been a warrant outstanding for his arrest for over 3 months. This is one example of violent crime, and there are others. Taken together, they have caused many people to call for reform of the bail system. I've heard from provincial and territorial leaders, mayors, police, and individual members of the public. En janvier, les premiers ministres des provinces ont écrit au Premier ministre du Canada pour proposer des changements à nos lois sur la mise en liberté sous caution. L'Ontario a d'ailleurs déjà entrepris d'examiner la façon dont le régime de mise en liberté sous caution est mis en œuvre sur son territoire. Nous avons entendu aujourd'hui que plusieurs provinces ont récemment pris des mesures pour traiter la question des récidivistes violents. Ces initiatives sont bien accueillies et elles sont importantes. Nous, en tant que ministre de la Justice et ministre de la Sécurité publique, avons la responsabilité partagée de veiller à ce que le système de justice pénale favorise la sécurité publique et, surtout, préserve la confiance du public. Le système de mise en liberté sous caution fait partie de nos responsabilités communes. So how did it go today? This was a good and productive meeting. We have made real progress on a plan to continue strengthening Canada's bail system. We have a broad consensus on a path forward, one based on a set of shared principles and clear objectives. That starts with a commitment from our government, the federal government, to move forward quickly on targeted reforms to the criminal code on the law of bail. The reforms will address the challenges posed by repeat violent offenders, as well as offenses committed involving the use of firearms and other weapons, such as knives and bear spray. Je suis reconnaissant envers mes homologues pour leurs suggestions réfléchies et bien préparées au sujet des propositions et au sujet des modifications supplémentaires ciblées au Code criminel. Je leur ai promis, plus tôt aujourd'hui, que mes collègues et moi continuerons de travailler avec eux au cours des prochaines semaines pour établir un ensemble robuste de mesures qui répondra aux besoins des Canadiens. Nous avons aussi établi qu'il faut adopter des mesures non législatives au niveau provincial et fédéral pour renforcer le système de mise en liberté sous caution. Mes collègues ont souligné certaines de leurs excellentes initiatives pour relever les défis auxquels nous sommes confrontés en ce qui concerne la mise en liberté sous caution. Vous en apprendrez davantage à ce sujet sous peu. We also all committed that any measures we pursue must not undermine the important work we are all doing within our relevant jurisdictions to address the overrepresentation of Indigenous people, Black people, racialized people, and marginalized people in our criminal justice system. Bail is a constitutional right, but it is not absolute. Our laws are clear that bail can be denied where there is just cause, when it is necessary for the safety of the public or to maintain the public's confidence in the administration of justice. We all know that public confidence in our criminal justice system has been affected by recent events.
I hope our work today will help to reverse that trend. It is important for Canadians to see ministers of different political stripes coming together to deal with our collective challenges. Nous sommes convaincus que la collaboration entre tous les ordres du gouvernement ainsi qu'avec les organisations autochtones nationales, les municipalités, les services de police et les fournisseurs de traitement et de services nous permettra d'améliorer le système de mise en liberté sous caution, d'assurer la sécurité des Canadiens et de respecter la Charte canadienne des droits et libertés. Nous avons encore beaucoup de travail à faire pour donner suite aux engagements que nous avons pris aujourd'hui et je me réjouis de la perspective de poursuivre sur notre lancée. I'd like to thank my provincial and territorial counterparts again for their proactive work and their focus on this issue. Together, we can make tangible changes that will keep our communities safe. Thank you. Merci. Over to Minister Mendicino for a few words.
Mais merci, David. Pas beaucoup de choses d'ajouter. D'abord, je veux vous remercier pour votre leadership sur ce sujet-là et pour une très bonne discussion cette journée. I'd also like to take all of our provincial and territorial colleagues who participated in the discussion today. I think it's very important that Canadians see that governments of every stripe, at every level of government, are working together constructively to keep our communities safe. This special ad hoc meeting of the federal, provincial, territorial was called and convened by David Lametti and I for the purposes of coming together in the aftermath of a spate of violence that we have seen across the country. David, you mentioned Officer Pershala, an OPP officer who lost his life in the line of duty a number of months ago. I attended his funeral. I've attended the funerals of a number of other officers who lost their lives as a result of violence. It's also important to note that we see violence in Indigenous communities and rural communities across the country, and there is a common cause amongst all of us to address that with, I think, the kind of thoughtful discussion that we've had around making some important amendments to the criminal code to address some of the challenges in our bail system so that we can be sure that we are putting an emphasis of investing the resources that are necessary to address those serious, repeat, violent offenders who do pose an ongoing risk to community and public safety. And I think, as you heard David say today, we had a very constructive discussion in that regard. We also talked about some of the other non-legislative options that we work on every single day. And again, I want to highlight the very strong and positive degree of collaboration between our officials and our departments, and some of the opportunities that lie on the short-term horizon, I think, will allow us, again, to work to be sure that frontline police officers and other professionals who work in the space of keeping our communities safe will not only be able to bring those to justice, but also to prevent crime. And that was really the last thing that we spoke about today, which is addressing some of the social determinants, the root causes around barriers to getting the proper access to health care and mental health care, which can sometimes lead to violence, tragedy, and loss. So on the whole, I would say a very constructive, a very productive meeting today. There's obviously still some work to be done. You've heard Minister Lametti talk about the path forward, but again, I just want to say in conclusion that this is exactly the way I think Canadians expect us to work, which is in a collaborative way to keep our community safe. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. It's so great to be here today and to stand up here with my colleagues from across the province and across the country, Minister Lametti and Mr. Mendicino. We came here this morning as leaders from across this country with a common cause, and that is to try to improve the safety in our communities, particularly with bail reform around repeat violent offenders. And what we heard from the federal government is a clear commitment to make those legislative changes to the criminal code as early as this spring. and we're really looking forward to that. What we also heard was a commitment to work together for the non-legislative changes that we know we need to support each province on. I heard a lot of examples from leaders across this province of great initiatives that they're working on to help with the impacts of violent crime in their communities. It was a great sharing of ideas, but also a real strong sign of support from the federal government for supporting those initiatives and programs as we develop it. Minister Mendicino spoke about the social determinatives of health and all the things that we care about in terms of removing the root causes of crime in our community, which we were all aligned on. I'm really looking forward to going back to British Columbia, and I'm sure all of my colleagues are looking forward to going back to their jurisdictions to see this work happen quickly and to get to work in fixing what we know is, improving safety in our communities. Thank you.
Today's a good day. It shows how federalism in this country can work when provinces and the federal government work together on issues that matter and of concern to Canadians from coast to coast to coast. The provinces raised the issue of public safety and in particular bail reform at our meeting in Halifax, Dartmouth back in October. At that time, there was a commitment that there would be further meetings to explore, get detail into the issue, to come up with solutions. That's led to today's meeting. A lot of work's gone into this. The Premier's met with the Prime Minister, stressed how important this is. All the provinces worked hard together with the federal government, our two federal colleagues, Minister Lametti and Minister Mendicino. And the result is an agreement for amendments to the criminal code dealing with bail reform, as well as other issues that we can continue to work on, non-legislative. And also recognizing that each of us as jurisdictions have a role to play. The criminal code is a federal responsibility. As provinces, we're responsible for policing in our jurisdictions and for the delivery of the social programs that deal with often the root causes of crime. And there's a shared commitment from all of us to ensure that we continue in those endeavors to make our communities safer. And so we're pleased with today's agreement and today's announcements, and I think it bodes well for public safety in the country. And colleagues.
From the Manitoba perspective, we don't always come to Ottawa and get exactly what we want, but we felt heard today, and we came away with a lot of what we were looking for. In particular, in Manitoba, we had concerns around the use of bear spray, the use of knives when it comes to violent crime, and I know there's been a lot of focus on the use of guns in the commission of crime, and that is important, particularly in the tragic deaths of officers. But I'm pleased to see the flexibility that was there at the table today to look at some of the other challenges in provinces, and the challenge in Manitoba when it comes to violent crime is similar as it is in other parts of Canada, but sometimes the weapons that are used are different. And so the criminal code amendments that have been proposed take into account Manitoba's concern. It's not the end of the discussion, but it's a very, very important milestone in the discussion. And of course, before I turn it over to my colleagues from other provinces, it's not about ministers and it's not about governments, it's about victims and those who deserve to feel safe in their community. I think everyone started with the discussion around why are we here, and we're here because there are many Canadians who don't feel safe in their community for a variety of different reasons. We won't be able to solve all of those problems, but there were things specifically we could do today, and commitments have been made today that I think will prevent some individuals from being victimized. And that is our role as ministers of justice. And so I'm pleased to note that our voice was heard, that commitments have been made, and that we believe action will be taken. Thank you.
Alrighty, my name is Tim Warmington. I'm the Manager of Public Affairs at Public Safety Canada. We'll take questions now from press. Opposite me on the other side of the pool, there's a microphone there. Please identify your name, your outlet, and which minister you'd like to speak to. Go ahead.
Hi, Jordan Gowling, CTV News. This question's for Minister Lametti on a different matter. We're learning that Supreme Court Judge Russell Brown is being investigated for an incident in Arizona in which he was allegedly drunk and involved in a fight after an event to honor the Lord. Do you think he should be removed from the court?
I obviously have no comment, can make no comment. The matter is seized of the Canadian Judicial Council. I was made aware of a leave of absence because there was a statutory requirement that I be made aware of a leave of absence a number of days ago, a couple of weeks ago. I don't have the exact date, but that's all I know in the matter. I'm reading about it as you do. I can't make any pronouncement whatsoever in the eventual possibility that the Canadian Judicial Council goes in one direction or the other. So that's all I'll say on that.
Okay, and my follow-up's on the announcement today. Is this an acknowledgement, perhaps, from your government that the principle of restraint and in Bill C-75, that perhaps you went a little too far in making bail too easy? That's sort of a criticism that was made by the opposition on this issue. Thank you.
The latter principle of restraint, they're long-standing principles. The Canadian Supreme Court has, in a number of decisions, elaborated the law that was framed in Bill C-75. And again, it's part of these are charter rights. They were protected prior to the Charter in the Canadian Bill of Rights. They were protected and they evolved through the common law tradition. So these are long-standing rights. What we're doing today, what we've committed to do today, is take other actions with respect to the criminal code, again, to address particular issues, violent repeat offenders, and offenses with weapons, including weapons such as knives or bear spray when they're used as a weapon. And so these are particular examples of where we feel there is a challenge, and where we feel we need to not just make Canadians safer, but make Canadians feel safer. And so we're taking specific measures in that regard.
David Aiken, Global News. Good afternoon, Ministers. Start with Minister Lametti. I have a question for you, and I wonder if Mr. Downey can respond as well to this. And that is that OPP Commissioner Carrique was in front of the Justice Committee. You probably reviewed his testimony. And he had a pretty simple ask, and I haven't seen any communique, so I'm hoping that, I'm not sure what you've agreed on, but one of his asks was for any person accused of a weapons offense, full stop, just that, not prior charges, that the reverse onus provision for bail would apply to that individual, that accused person. And I wonder if that's something that you had in fact agreed to, and the same twist to Minister Downey, if that's something you came today, and what you'll tell Commissioner Carrique next time you see him.
I won't discuss what actually is going to come out, but there's still a question of the usual process of cabinet confidence and then tabling a bill in front of the House of Commons. But we certainly heard from the OPP. We also consulted with the OPP before this meeting, and a number of my colleagues, it's fair to say, raised similar concerns today. And I can say in a very general way, that's one of the issues that we're looking at.
Thank you.
Happy to address the question, and Commissioner Carrique, who is doing a fantastic job in Ontario. I want to commend him for his leadership. And I think it dovetails nicely with Premier Ford's leadership and the letter that was sent that you all have a copy of. So to answer your question, is that an issue that we raised? Absolutely, it was an issue we raised. We felt heard. There's a lot of collaboration. I look forward to action sooner than later.
Thank you very much. Next question I have is from Minister Mendicino and Minister Shandro. And that's the ball launched, I guess, from Minister Shandro in your Firearms Act recently introduced in Alberta. Minister Mendicino, I wonder what you think of it, first of all. And then for Minister Shandro, I think most Canadians have an expectation that where a provincial agency is enforcing federal laws, that will happen in a uniform basis no matter where I travel in Canada, and why Alberta should be exceptional in that case, believing it can choose which aspects of federal laws it may not wish to enforce. I think a lot of Canadians are wondering why Alberta ought to be so special, perhaps sometimes in the same way we once thought, why should Quebec be so special? We're all part of this federation. Minister Mendicino?
I think all of us are special, but I'd start by saying, David, happy Friday. Look, it's a good question. I think what you would find across the Federation is that at every level of government, we are united in the cause of keeping our community safe. against gun violence, against any type of violent offense. Certainly at the federal level of government, we have put forward a comprehensive approach that looks at making smart changes to the law when it comes to responsible firearms possession and restrictions and the like, through the form of a national handgun freeze and a national assault-style rifle ban. We've also put in place a significant investments to stop the illegal flow of guns into our country. In the last 2 years alone, approximately $450 million into the CBSA, which gives them the additional resources, the technology, and the tactics that they need to interdict the flow of illegal contraband, including guns. And I've seen some of that on display myself, and I highlighted that progress, which I think is something that all of our provincial and territorial partners would acknowledge. And then finally, as the last prong of our comprehensive approach to gun violence, we need to stop it before it starts. And we're doing that through the Building Safer Communities Fund. We talked a little bit about how we can share some of the successes, frankly, of preventative strategies, and we heard from Alberta and other jurisdictions. And one of the positive outcomes of today's meeting is that I think we can build on that collaboration so that we can scale up those types of strategies going forward. We're not going to agree on every single policy. I think that's natural. And to be sure, I know that Minister Shandro and I do look for other ways in which we can collaborate. For example, when it comes to the expansion of First Nations and Indigenous policing in his province through the coming back of the Siksika First Nation. I would say to you that today is another example where despite there may not be complete and total alignment on how we tackle a certain priority with regards to public safety, that we have found common ground when it comes to making some modifications, we think, in principle, to the bail system. And I think at the end of the day, that's what Canadians expect from responsible governments, is that not that you will find unanimity 100% of the time, Monday to Friday, or 24/7, 365 days a year. I think we'd all acknowledge that's a bit unrealistic, but that notwithstanding those disagreements, that you find ways in which to work together. And certainly I feel like we were able to make some important progress on that front today. And now I'll turn it over to Minister Shandro.
Thanks for the question. I would say that our Alberta Firearms Act is nuanced and balanced legislation, and we have to remember that both the federal government and the provincial government have a role to play in firearms regulation, and that the provinces have a role to play in the operation of and the implementation of the Federal Firearms Act. And that's what this is doing, that if there is going to be an increase in the storage, the transportation, and the movement of firearms throughout the province, that the province has a role to play in ensuring the safety of such a program as that, the confiscation program. And that's what this legislation is designed to do, is to ensure that the province does have a role in ensuring the safety of the communities. And look, we continue to have a focus on ways to continue to look at, both me and Minister Ellis. Minister Ellis unfortunately wasn't able to attend this press conference, but for the two of us to look at innovative ways to continue to focus our efforts in Alberta on improving community safety instead of being distracted by targeting law-abiding Canadians or an effort to criminalize Canadians for the simple act of possessing property that was legally acquired. Thank you.
As for Mr. Lametti, it's Fraser Needham from EPN National News. So going back to that Justice Committee earlier in the week that you were at for the first part of it, two Indigenous police chiefs spoke about what they called abuses of glad you factors in bail hearings and use of that. One of them termed it as a get out of jail free card for abuse, and they want to see reforms. Are you willing to look at reforming the glad you factors as they apply to bail?
Well, the glad you factors as they apply to bail are meant to combat the systemic overrepresentation of Indigenous peoples in the criminal justice system. And some of the reforms brought in C-75 dealt with administration of justice offenses, which were minor offenses that that often occurred in the case of Indigenous peoples, where one missed a bail hearing for remote persons living in remote places, for example. And so it was meant to not pull people into the revolving door of the criminal justice system for those kinds of activities. They were never meant to be something that undermined public safety, and so and the security of the public. And I think that's a message that we need to transmit, that they are there legitimately to be factored in as one of the causes of criminality, or one of the factors that went in, and therefore ought to be taken into consideration at decision points such as bail or later in sentencing. But they're not meant to endanger the security of the public. And so it is something that we will continue to study and continue to work with both provinces and territories, but also Indigenous leadership in that regard.
Right, but you're aware that Randall Mackenzie was out on bail largely on glad you factors at the time of the incident that he's charged for, and what the Six Nations police chief said, which is very close by where Officer Priscilla was killed, was that people know how to play the system, that often actually there's no requirement for them to even to show any proof of their indigeneity, and people are claiming far back ancestors and abusing the system. This is their words. Do you not think it's maybe time to look again at glad you factors, how they're being used, and particularly in bail hearings?
Well, that decision, other decisions are very complex cases. If you look and read the reasons, I'm not going to accept the premise that there's one single reason why a person was out on bail or not granted bail. They're complex decisions, a complex variety of factors, which we leave to the justice of the peace or to the judge making that decision in our system. That being said, there's always a message that we can reinforce. And so there are two messages here. One is that glad you factors are there to help us attack the systemic overrepresentation of Indigenous peoples in the criminal justice system. The Supreme Court has said that in the Gladue case. And the second is they're not there to jeopardize the security of the rest of society.
Thank you. We have time for one last question.
It's Dave Fraser from the Canadian Press. This is for the Minister. I'm wondering, can you explain to us how you'll balance the right to bail with the provisions that you're committing to today, given that you've stated and experts have stated that there's already too many people in jail waiting trial?
Well, again, I'm not going to articulate the detail of the commitments today, but our discussions today were framed by the Charter. We're framed by the Charter rights that we have, and the Supreme Court decisions that have I guess, laid out the parameters of those Charter rights with respect to bail. You have a right to bail. You're innocent until proven guilty. Those are fundamental parts of our criminal justice system. We will work within those parameters to find appropriate balances to make sure that we can attack the challenge of repeat violent offenders and the challenge of offenses committed with certain kinds of weapons. And that's our commitment. We're confident that we can do it, and we will do it.
Why are you not able just to tell us today whether or not you're looking at or committing to introducing reverse onus provisions into the criminal code? Why can't you just say yes or no? Make that clear to us.
Well, I can't get out in front of my parliamentary colleagues, and I can't get out in front of my cabinet colleagues.
Fair enough. Thanks.
Thank you. That concludes our event for today. Merci beaucoup. If you have additional questions, please don't hesitate to call Media Relations at Justice Canada, media@justice.jc.ca, or Media Relations at Public Safety Canada, media@ps-sp.jc.ca. Thank you.